I get it, you've probably already bought a cheap external enclosure or a budget-grade NAS that promised gigabit speeds and enough room for all your media, only to discover that after a month of real work the drives were choking, the network kept dropping, and you're left paying for a second unit. That feeling of buyer's remorse is why I pause before throwing money at any storage box that looks good on paper. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. In this video I'm going to walk through why the QNAP TS16558 GUS feels like a smarter, more future-proof buy if you actually need what it offers and where it can still bite you if you're not careful. First off, let's set the scene. The TS1655 is a tower-style NAS with 12 3.5-inch bays. That alone tells you it's aimed at people who want a serious amount of raw capacity. Think a small production studio, a home lab with multiple VMs, or a family that streams 4K movies to every room while still keeping a massive photo archive. It's not a plug-and-play device for a single laptop. The box ships without any hard drives, so you have to budget for the disks separately. That can be a shock if you were expecting an all-in-one solution, but it also means you can pick the exact drives you need in NAS-grade, high capacity, or even a mixed RAID setup for performance versus redundancy. The heart of the machine is an Intel Atom C5125, an 8-core processor clocked at 2.8 GHz. For NAS, that's a surprisingly beefy CPU. In everyday terms, it means you can run multiple services at once without the system grinding to a halt. I've seen people spin up Plex media servers, Docker containers, and even Windows virtual machines on similar QNAP models, and the Atom line handles those workloads decently. If you're planning to transcode 4K video on the fly for remote streaming, the extra cores give you a real chance of smooth playback, whereas a weaker dual-core processor would stall every time you hit a high bitrate file. Network connectivity is another area where the TS1655 tries to differentiate itself. It comes with two 2.5 gigabit Ethernet ports that can be bonded for up to 5 gigabits per second of throughput, or you can fall back to standard 1 gigabit per second or even 100 megabits per second if your router only supports those speeds. In practice, that means if you have a 2.5 GBE switch or a router that can handle the speed, your file transfers to a workstation or a media server will feel noticeably faster than the usual 125 megabytes per second ceiling of gigabit Ethernet. For a home office that moves large datasets, think video editing projects, engineering simulations, or backup archives, that extra bandwidth can shave hours off a nightly backup. Now, let's talk about the practical strengths that matter after you've unpacked the chassis. First, the 12 bays give you flexibility in configuring RAID. You can go for RAID 5 for a balance of capacity and redundancy, RAID 6 if you want to survive 2 drive failures, or even set up separate storage pools for different purposes: one pool for your media library, another for critical work documents. The QNAP operating system, QTS, makes creating and managing those pools relatively painless, with a dashboard that shows drive health, temperature, and usage at a glance. Second, the dual 2.5 GBE ports can be used in failover mode, which is a nice safety net. If your primary network cable gets unplugged, your NAS will automatically switch to the backup link without dropping connections. Third, the tower design means you can mount the unit on a rack later if you outgrow your desk space. You just need a rack mount kit, but the chassis is built to accommodate that. On the flip side, there are some hidden trade-offs you should be aware of before you click Add to Cart. The biggest is cost. Because the box doesn't include drives, the total price tag can climb quickly once you add 12 10 terabytes or 12 terabytes NAS-grade HDDs. That's fine if you have a budget for storage, but it's a stark contrast to the all-in-one solutions that bundle disks at a lower per terabyte price. Power consumption is another practical concern. 12 spinning drives plus a constantly running CPU can draw a noticeable amount of electricity, especially if you leave the unit on 24/7 for real-time backups. In a typical home environment, you might see a bill increase of a few dollars a month, which is something budget-conscious users might want to factor in. Noise is a subtle but real issue. 12 drives generate a low-level hum that can become audible if the NAS sits in a living room or home office without adequate ventilation. QNAP includes a fan that ramps up based on temperature, so under heavy load like when you're doing a full